Hey there, it's Olivia-Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you an unhaul where I am passing along some books and letting them leave my shelves. I often have books coming in and out, but without further ado, let me talk about these books and why they are leaving my shelf. So I will begin with the DNFs as I usually do. We have a few here because I don't have time for books I'm not enjoying. So the first one is three books, the first three books in a series, and that is Hooked, Wretched and Scarred by Emily McIntire. This dark romance series has been taking BookTube by storm, and the very first one is the only one I tried, and that is Hooked. It's a retelling of Peter Pan and it's dark romancy, and I read all of 25 pages because I could not stand the writing. I've recently discovered that I do really like super steamy end books, and I'm more interested in the dark romance genre than I was before, but I have limits, and the limit is good writing. If the writing isn't good, I'm not going to read the romance book. I need good writing, and this was not giving me that. The writing was just so poor. I couldn't believe that this is what has taken people by storm. What? Even the steamy scenes weren't good, and I have to say, I skipped ahead just to see what the steamy scenes were like, but honey, read a Sarah Simone book and get on the level, because it was one and done. Some of the scenes just felt very one and done, and Hook was doing some really disturbing stuff, and you know what? Everybody has their own thing. It was very insta-lovey, it was very like unrealistic. I couldn't get behind it, and so I read 25 pages and I thought, what is this? And then I skipped ahead and read a couple scenes in the future of this particular book because I was wondering, am I just needing to hold out? Will it get any better? And it did not seem like it was getting any better. So I know people are really loving these books, and I'm sure that these will find a new home somewhere that is not here. Another review copy one is Wreck the Halls by Tessa Bailey, and this is actually very interesting because you'll know if you've watched some of my recent reads videos that I read It Happened One Summer, and I absolutely enjoyed it and loved it and thought it was really, really fun. However, this was the book I tried to read first. This was actually my first Tessa Bailey. I was reading in December, it was Christmas time, and I love a good Christmassy story. Christmassy rom-coms, I love them. This one, I couldn't deal with it. I think I read about 50 to 75 pages. The main characters are called Melody and Beat, and it is about music in some way or form. And I struggle with cringe names in romance books. It's like Beach Read with January and Augustus or something. I just could not get over their names, so that was a struggle. But then also, it was this rich girl who had all this money, and she was just complaining. I just couldn't stand with her rich girl problems. She was living in a flat that she didn't have to pay rent on, and she was talking about how she's struggling to find meaning in life. And you know what? That is a valid problem. That is a valid problem. No matter how much money you have, mental health is important. I just really didn't care. I just really didn't care. Both of them were well off to some degree, and while one of them was being blackmailed, which gotta give it to him for not touching the charity funds, I really just struggled to care about them, and it felt very insta-lovey, and it just was not doing what a romance does for me. So I DNF'd this, and I immediately went and picked up It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey to give her a second chance, and just to know if I needed to unhaul that one as well. And I started it, and that one also had a rich girl main character, and I loved it, and it was a completely different experience to reading this one. So I'm not quite sure what happened there, but in the space of a month I tried two Tessa Bailey books, and one I hated and one I loved. So now I am very, very confused, and if you're a Tessa Bailey fan, can you please let me know which one of her books I need to try next, because I do want to read more of her work. I do want to give her like a third chance to see if I do like all of her books, and it was just that the Christmassy one was not one for me. I DNF'd The Beekeeper of Aleppo by Christy, Lefteri. Now, I got this one and I wasn't really sure about it because it is like a historical fiction literary book, and I am very particular and fussy about those. I got this one in a secondhand bookshop, so it didn't cost me that much money, and I thought, let me give it a chance. Let me give it a chance. It could be like Kristen Hannah to me. I don't know if it was just wrong timing for me, or if this book is just not the level of depth that it needed to be, but everything was kind of ringing false to some sense. And so after 100 pages, I thought I'd given it a fair shot, and I'm ready to move on. And I let it go. I'm going to talk about all of these young adult contemporaries very quickly. So I got History Is All You Left Me by Silvera. I got this from an Unhaul from a friend, Hannah, and I used to really like Adam Silvera's books. As a teenager, I was all about them, and at some point I decided I was done, and that was Infinity Sun. That was the point. That book was the point when I decided I didn't need any more Adam Silvera in my life. However, this book felt like the one that got away from me because it is his one that focuses the most on grief, and so I wanted to give it a shot because I thought if I am going to appreciate any of his young adult contemporaries still, it's going to be his one that focuses on grief, of course. That's one of the topics I really like to read about, but I just wasn't getting into it. It just felt a bit cringy, and it pains me to say it because I do read a lot of young adult as an adult and I still enjoy it, but this one felt very young to me, and I don't know if my teenage self would have liked it. I can't even figure that out, but it just read too young for my taste right now, and so it saddened me to DNF this. I also DNF'd Alex Approximately by Jenn Bennett. Now, when I was a teenager and the correct age audience, I read Night Owls by this author and I really loved it. I gave it 5 stars back then. I haven't read it since, so I don't know if it holds up. I don't even have the book to breeze through it because I read it on an ebook. But I've always been meaning to try more of her writing, and so when Hannah unhauled Alex Approximately as well, I decided to pick it up, but I DNF'd it after about 75 pages. I think what went wrong with me and this one is that I realised that I do love young adult contemporary, but there kind of needs to be an angle to it. I think it needs to be about disability, or it needs to kind of be focusing on grief or friendship or family, one of the key themes that I really like, and this one kind of doesn't seem to be touching on any of them. And I do think it's going to talk about disability at some point because there is the love interest, I think, is scarred and has scars all up his arm, but when she saw the scars she kept using words like ugly and other terms that indicate non-aesthetically pleasing views of the scars, and I was just like, I don't need that in my life. I don't need that in my life. And I think it was also because it wasn't him talking about himself, so it wasn't like he is struggling with the fact that he has these scars and needs to overcome it or needs to learn to love himself, or it's his feelings on it. It was like her feelings when she first saw them, and she wasn't describing him as ugly but was describing his scars as ugly, and I'm still also not about that language. So that kind of turned me off, combined with the fact that it was doing a You've Got Mail situation with the fact that they were anonymously texting online but they didn't realise that they'd met in person as well. I'm just not really about that storyline, so I decided to DNF. And then Influential by Amara Sage. I read about 150 pages of this, so that's more than I usually read before I DNF, and it was presenting a very interesting concept of being a child influencer. She's a teen influencer, and she's an influencer because her mum is a mum influencer, and so her parents have recently split, and it does have to do with the fact that her mum is so focused on just building the brand and forcing her into building the brand as well, and she's struggling with her mental health. She doesn't know if this is really what she wants to be doing, but she does feel kind of coerced and bullied into it because of the contracts and the money that she's making that she doesn't get to touch yet. And it was a very interesting topic. I am quite fascinated about these like mummy bloggers and talking about children's rights and teens' rights and how it's affecting their mental health. I know that conversation is happening at large at the moment. So that was all really fascinating, but I also just wasn't quite getting into it. There was just something that was holding me back, and I actually don't think I've delved into or understand what that was, and often I feel like I'm pretty good at pinpointing this is why I don't like something. I don't have that here, so actually I skim read this. I'm calling it a DNF, but because the topic was so fascinating, I did skim read the whole thing. So I know exactly what happens and I know the story, but I wouldn't say that I read every single word, so I'm not counting it as a read book. I am still counting it as a DNF because while it was a fascinating concept and so interesting, it still didn't captivate me enough to want to sit down and actually read the whole book. I'm going to quickly put this here. There is one book that I'm unhauling in this stack that I haven't read, and that's Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes, and this is not because it's a bad book, it's not because I DNF'd it, it's not because I didn't like it, it's because I bought myself a hardcover from Lianne from Literary Diversion. So I haven't read this one yet, but I still will read it because I've got a hardback. It's a duplicate now, and I got the hardback because I loved Divine Might by Natalie Haynes so much, and the writing in it in particular so much, that I'm convinced I'm going to love all of her fiction. And so if I could get the special Waterstones edition hardcover from Lianne's Unhaul, I was jolly well going to do that. And so we've come to the last section of this unhaul, and that is books I've read but I've decided I'm not going to keep. So the first one we have here is All About Love by Bell Hooks. I've talked about this in a recent reads video where I thought it was just okay. I didn't think that it particularly revolutionized my views on love the way that it seems to have done for other people, and while there were one or two things that I took away from this book, I don't have that much shelf space anymore, and I need to let go of books that I don't think I'm going to reread, especially non-fiction that I don't think I'm going to dip back into. I think what this has going for it is its discussions on childhood upbringing and love, materialism and love, and its definition of love. But all the rest of the chapters, so barring the first 3 chapters, were just okay reads to me, so I don't need to keep it. I read A Spell of Good Things by Ayobami Adebayo, and unfortunately I just did not love it as much as Stay With Me. It took me a long time to get through this book because it was incredibly slow paced, and it also fell into a bit of a stereotype that this book did as well, where it's just like black men who are no good and women who stick by these kind of abusive partners for a duration, a period. Whether they overcome that or not, I won't tell you because that's spoilers, but I was quite tired of seeing this in black literature when I was reading these 2 books, and that's the main reason both of these are going, because they just were middle of the road read for me. I'm exhausted by their narratives, particularly this one where that is the main and all about it narrative. While Middle Daughter is really well written and I think a really good book, I've just had enough of this storyline, so that's why that's going. And this one equally has that as well, but also it's got 2 storylines in this one and I don't think it balanced them well, and it took too long for them to connect, and I just didn't see the point of this book after finishing it. And you need to have a takeaway to your book. There needs to be something that I come away with, like, that was a good book because of this, or I learned this from a book, and this gave me neither. So yeah, these 2 are gonna go. There are some books that I read and I enjoyed but I don't feel like I need to keep. So we have The Beholders by Hester Musson, and this is kind of a gothic-y historical fiction book. It's written in diary format, which is not my favourite format for writing because everything ends up told in hindsight, and so that kind of gave me some distance from the book. But it was one of those books where it's a house full of secrets, and I think the secrets were actually really done well, and I was interested in what these secrets were, and I think they were darker than I expected them to be. And actually I read this in a weekend because I was so riveted by the book. So ultimately I did like this book. I did think it was very good. I'm just never going to reread it, and I think if I kept it now, later down the line, I would end up unhauling it because it's just not something that's a priority for me on my shelf. I'm trying to only keep 4 or 5 stars, and this was a middle of the road rating. So while it's a good book and I recommend it to people, I don't need to keep it. Similar story to Lark and Kasim, Start a Revolution by Kasim Calendar. So I'm not going to go into the details of this book because my thoughts on it are actually very mixed and very complex and complicated, but I'm going to leave a link to the recent reads where I talk about this one because it does stuff that I haven't seen. Black, queer teenagers, polyamorous teenagers, and they're tackling these really tough subjects, and I did ultimately feel quite moved by this story and appreciated how it went into depth on each and every single one of its topics and balanced it and had realistic feeling characters and a messy situation that felt so teenager but also just so good in terms of teenager, if that makes any sense. So it was a really good book. But I also felt like the author's voice came through a bit too much and it got a bit preachy at times. Even though it was preaching on good things to preach about, it did feel quite preachy and the writing was a bit clunky. So I'm drifting with this book, but it is one that I think my sister is going to enjoy reading, my younger sister Simi. So I think I'm going to just give this one to her, and if she doesn't want it, I'm sure there are going to be other teenagers who could take value from this. Julieta and the Romeos by Maria E. Andreu, which again I read and I thought it was just a middle of the road read. I mostly read this for its tenuous link to Romeo and Juliet, which doesn't quite come to fruition, but just by it being called Julieta and the Romeos, it's really clear who out of the 3 male love interests that she has that she could potentially be with, she's going to end up with. So while this story was predictable, and while I saw every single twist and turn coming, I enjoyed learning more about the Argentinian culture in this one, and I also just had fun with the drama that a love square brings. I do like to read books with drama in them. I find it quite entertaining and fun, and this served its purpose, but I don't need to keep it. Like, it served its purpose. I'm not going to read it again. Last but not least, I'm unhauling Koku, Akanbi and the Heart of Midnight by Maria Motunrayo Adebayo, and this is a middle grade book that kind of has African mythology ties to it, and it has a main character who's got sickle cell. It's got magic in it. It's a middle grade fantasy book, and I thought it was okay. I didn't love it as much as I want to, and this could be partly because I'm reading a lot of middle grade fantasy lately, but it just didn't stand out to me. That's not to say it was a bad book, it's just I read a lot of books and you've got to stand out if you want to stick on my shelf. And there you have it, those are some books that are leaving my shelf. It's very interesting that there's no unread books leaving. It's all books that I've read or tried to read, so my unhauls are definitely shifting in nature, and we'll see how that goes in future with future unhauls. Please let me know in the comment section down below what was the last book you read that you didn't like or you didn't love as much as you wanted to. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!